By the mid-1840s, Texas had firmly established itself as both a symbol and a strategic asset for the young United States. Having won independence from Mexico less than a decade earlier, Texas now stood as a gateway to the vast, untamed lands of the Southwest. Its rivers, plains, and deserts were not just geographical features. They were arteries through which the lifeblood of America's westward expansion would flow. Settlers, soldiers, traders, and visionaries looked to Texas as the launchpad for a destiny that would eventually stretch from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific Ocean. The period between 1846 and 1848 was especially critical. The Mexican-American War had begun, and with it, the stakes of controlling Texas and its surrounding territories skyrocketed. Every fort, every patrol, every wagon train that moved westward became part of a much larger mission, securing the Southwest for the United States. Texas's position made it a natural staging ground for the U.S. Army, which used its cities, ports, and rivers to supply troops and establish lines of communication deep into contested lands. Cities like Austin and San Antonio became hubs of strategy and logistics, their streets buzzing with the urgency of a nation determined to fulfill its manifest destiny. Texians themselves were pivotal to this mission. They understood the terrain in a way few others did. Rangers, militia units, and settlers with decades of frontier experience navigated rivers, deserts, and mountains, charting routes that would eventually become trade roads, mail routes, and military supply lines. Scouts traversed the rugged Southwest, identifying potential hazards, locating water sources, and mapping the best paths for migration and troop movement. These men weren't just explorers, they were America's advance party, ensuring that the country could expand safely, efficiently, and securely. Their courage and insight became legendary, not just in Texas, but across the entire nation, reinforcing the idea that the Lone Star State was indispensable to America's continental ambitions. Beyond military logistics, Texas's geography influenced the larger American vision. Control of the Rio Grande and surrounding territories meant that settlers moving westward would have a secure base from which to venture into New Mexico, Arizona, and eventually California. Roads and trails pioneered by Texans became the first veins through which the promise of the Pacific flowed. Every successful patrol, every safe caravan, every defended settlement was a tangible step toward a coast that had once seemed impossibly distant. Americans looking east of the Mississippi could now imagine their nation spanning the continent, and Texas was the key to making that dream a reality. Moving across the Southwest was no simple feat. The journey from Texas to the Pacific was fraught with danger, challenge, and unpredictability. Deserts stretched endlessly under a blazing sun. Mountain passes tested even the most experienced riders, and hostile groups, whether insurgents, raiders, or unsympathetic indigenous tribes, made every mile a negotiation between life and death. Yet the Texans, seasoned by frontier life and war, were uniquely prepared for these trials. During the Mexican-American War, Texian troops often acted as the first wave of exploration and security. They established encampments along rivers, defended supply lines, and scouted ahead for enemy forces. Their ability to read the land, anticipate ambushes, and survive under harsh conditions made them indispensable. Each successful reconnaissance mission expanded America's influence and opened the door for civilian settlers to follow. In essence, Texas became the bridge between the known East and the unclaimed, challenging West. The influence of Texas extended beyond the battlefield. Entrepreneurs, traders, and settlers followed the same paths blazed by Texians, transforming them into trade routes and economic lifelines. Wagon trains carried goods, livestock, and families, steadily establishing the patterns of settlement that would define the American West. Each journey required courage, resourcefulness, and endurance, echoing the ethos that Texans had cultivated for decades: to face adversity head-on, protect what is yours, and pave the way for future generations. Even small victories were magnified in importance. A successful convoy across the Rio Grande, a well-defended encampment, or a patrol that avoided ambush became stories of national pride. Letters and newspapers spread these tales, turning local Texian heroism into inspiration for Americans nationwide. Texans weren't just defending their state, they were advancing the United States itself, carrying the promise of an American nation that could stretch from ocean to ocean. By 1848, the impact of Texas on America's continental expansion was unmistakable. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the war, and the United States officially gained control of vast southwestern territories. The roads, knowledge, and experience developed in Texas had laid the groundwork for westward settlement and integration of these new lands. Texas had not only defended the frontier, it had opened the entire western pathway to the Pacific, turning ambition into reality and ensuring that the American dream extended to the very edge of the continent. Texas's contribution to America's westward expansion became part of the nation's identity. The state's soldiers, scouts, and settlers had secured the Southwest, allowing migration, commerce, and governance to flourish. Every trail through the deserts and mountains of the Southwest carried echoes of Texian courage, strategy, and endurance. Roads that began as narrow frontier paths became highways of opportunity, linking the East to the Pacific and making possible the vast interconnected nation America is today. Texian ingenuity also influenced future American development. Methods of supply, fort construction, and route planning tested in the Southwest became standard practice for expansion across other territories. The resilience demonstrated on these journeys shaped the American ethos: perseverance, courage in the face of uncertainty, and commitment to a vision larger than oneself. Texans proved that a determined few could open the road for thousands, and in doing so, they became emblematic of the nation's pioneering spirit. The road to the Pacific, secured through Texas, also reinforced the country's global significance. America was no longer a regional power confined to the Atlantic seaboard. It was becoming a continental force, capable of projecting influence, defending territory, and creating opportunity across vast distances. Texans had made this possible, their sacrifices and leadership forming the backbone of continental expansion. Ultimately, the story of Texas and the Southwest is a story of vision and action. By opening the road to the Pacific, Texans ensured that the United States could fulfill its destiny as a nation spanning the continent. The lessons learned, the paths charted, and the courage displayed along those frontier routes are not just chapters in history, they are enduring reminders of what it means to be American: bold, determined, and capable of turning ambition into reality. Texas didn't just open a road, it opened the future of a nation.